monthly Brown Bag webcast. Today's special guest is Wil Reynolds. He is VP of Innovation at Seer Interactive. He's been with the organization for 19 years. I always saw him as the founder and CEO, but he's taken a different approach that he'll tell us about as VP of Innovation for the organization. Wil, it's a great to have you on board. Thank you. And can you briefly introduce yourself to the Anvil team and to the rest of the listeners for us?
Sure. My name is Wil Reynolds. I'm the founder of Seer Interactive, father of 2 kids, a good son, and to a mother and father, and an ever trying to be better husband to my wife. It's a journey, not a destination.
Isn't that true? I feel you on that. Thank you for the quick background. So I would like to start with your title, VP of Innovation. You started out, according to your LinkedIn, as an associate. You took the exact opposite approach of most founders of, I'm president and founder, but I decided personally at Anvil after 21 years, I was never going to be a CEO unless I had a board and more than, say, 50 employees. You've been there, you've been over 200 employees. So why not CEO? Why not CEO and founder? Why so humble?
Well, one, it's because it takes a whole crew of people. I think when we spend so much time trying to figure out what the pecking order is in our society. You look at the watch, you look at the car, you look at the house, and you try to figure people out. And, like those watches, houses, and cars are oftentimes purchased on the work of a collective, right? And for me, when I first started the business, having associate on my card meant a lot of people ignored me at networking events, which I liked, right? Because like, oh, you're just an associate somewhere. I'm going to not talk to you, which was helpful. Help weed out some douchebaggery. And I also have always felt that, I was just one person on the team who contributed to the overall success of the organization and the work that our clients, that we do for clients. So I've always kind of felt that in my soul.
That's awesome. I would like others to take your lead in the executive founder role. That's a good way to still put your business card in to win, Beats headphones, but also not be harassed.
Seriously.
So can you tell us this team, about your journey to founding Seer? Were you hit in the head, or were you fired twice before you realized you're unemployable, or did you have a vision one day?
Oh no, I'm hard to fire. Because wherever I went, I created a ton of value, and I wasn't a pain in the ass. But for me, it was. For me, honestly, I was trying to do this work. So it starts with me really liking my job, and I really like search, internet marketing, whatnot as a career. I really enjoy the work that you actually get to do, and the clients that we get to do it for. So once I found out that search was the right thing for me, I worked at one agency and then I worked in-house somewhere, but it was the second job where I had a cousin who got sick. And when he got sick, I went to go visit him, saw a bunch of volunteers. We're just kind of playing with him a little bit to take his mind off of his illness. And I was like, man, you know what? I went to school to be a teacher, so I never thought I would be a business person. And I was like, yeah, you know what? This is a way for me to get back to playing with kids and being involved with youth. So I decided to volunteer at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And every Wednesday from 6 to 9, I was playing with sick kids in the hospital. It was super dope. Then I went to my boss. So what's interesting is, I was 25 when I was doing this. So I didn't really have any empathy for what it was like to be a parent with a kid in the hospital. I had no idea what that was like. I was 25. But one of the things I started to learn is, parents go like, oh, if my kid really likes you, that gives us a little bit of time away when you're playing with our kid to have 15 minutes, 20 minutes together. And I went to my boss, Susan, and I said to her, hey, can I work through my lunch so I can get to my volunteer assignment on time? And because at that point, I'd been looking for jobs for probably 18 months. I really didn't like working in the company I was in. And she was like, no, Wil, I don't think we can do that for you. And at this time. And that day I called my mom and I was like, I think I'm going to have to start my own business because I've been knocking on doors of companies. So whenever I want a job, I knock on your door and tell you I want to work there. I'm not going to just be a name in a pile of resumes. My career is too important to me to leave my career up to chance. And in spite of spending 18 months knocking on the doors of many companies, many of them I knocked on 4 times, to try to get a job there. Never could get an interview, much less hired. So then when that happened at my current business, I'm like, well, what else do I have to do to try to like find a way to put some good in the world and do search? And that's how I ended up starting the business. Is once Susan said no, I called my mom and said, I think I'm going to have to start this thing up. And that's how I got started.
Fantastic story, and one shared by quite a few agency heads that were early in the game, like yourself. Now, for those that are listening and not watching, going podcast style, they might miss that you happen to be African American. I think it's important to mention that, because having been in this industry since '96, it's not very often that we see a lot of diversity in this space, and DEI is important for us and as an initiative and a movement at Anvil. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like building a business as a Black man in the United States, and maybe just a couple key takeaways you would want to share?
Sure. I don't have many takeaways. I don't have many because like I don't know what it's like to be a Black man in the United States building a business. I know what it's like being Wil Reynolds, who is Black in the United States trying to build a business. Because like, you know, I think a lot of well-meaning folks like make assumptions about my struggle, and they just haven't been the case for me. So like, you know, for me, maybe people weren't hiring me because I was Black, like back when I was looking for jobs, but how am I supposed to know that? Maybe I sucked. Maybe I didn't interview well. Maybe they didn't see things in my resume that they wanted. So like I try really hard to not go at the like, hey, people have asked me before, like, hey, Wil, do you think when you were knocking on doors trying to get a job, like, do you think that had anything to do with you being Black? I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to know? So like, and it's a pretty heavy thing to levy on somebody that they were biased against you, right, for your race. So therefore, like, I'm not levying that on the people who said no to me at that time. And then in terms of me building Seer, like Seer's been a really easy business to build. And like, you know, there's no struggle story here. There's literally zero struggle story. There's never been a month where I thought we weren't going to make it. Never in 19 years, never. There's never been a quarter where we weren't profitable. Never. So there's never been a year we weren't profitable in 19 years. So I haven't had much struggle in running the business as a CEO, period. And I always just said, if somebody doesn't pick me because, you know, they have biases, then it's my job to work with their competitor and make them freaking feel the pain of not hiring me. That I can control, and that I know I can help to make happen. Whereas like, you know, there's 1,001 reasons why people won't pick Seer for a project. And for me to try to decipher whether or not it's because I'm Black or because I wasn't the right match, to me is a complete waste of my time. If I get a hint that like there was something going on there I didn't like, then I'll just call up one of your competitors and try to help them win.
Right on. So what?
I'm competitive if you didn't notice. Like,
Yeah.
It's funny. Like, I have a huge, you know, streak of humility. Like, I'm not trying to like, you know, be overly braggadocious, but like, man, when it comes time to win, like, let's go get it. Like, let's go win.
Well, I think that it says it in your track record. I don't think very many business owners can say that they have a profitability quarter to quarter, year to year trend. So kudos to you on that. I think it'd be helpful for the listeners to know, like, what are the things you do day to day in your core responsibility as the founder and you know, chief innovation officer. What are the things you enjoy absolutely most that get you up in the morning? And conversely, what are the things you like drag your feet on? You're like, I wish I didn't have to do that. If you have either one of those, you may not have an answer for either one or both.
Yeah, no. I like seeing something that everyone has accepted as a truth, for lack of a better word, like a way of doing things, and just completely pivoting on that and showing the world a different way. And so I'm a builder. I like to build things, but I don't like to run things. So when you talk about the things I don't like having large teams that I have to run. So, you know, very early on, once this business started growing, I just started seeking out other people who could help us to win and run divisions. Like I build divisions, I don't run divisions. And I think there's a difference because I'm not an operator. So I like to take something that didn't exist, turn it into something, get it to a couple million, and then let somebody else who's much more capable run it, and then advise from a distance. But I do not enjoy the day-to-day of running a business because I'm not good at it, you know?
Right.
And, I want to see Seer thrive. And it's interesting, right? Like, so you got to think, I went to school to be a teacher. I kind of tripped into this business. It's been doing well for a very, very long time. And my fear is that I'm going to mess it up someday. That's always been my fear. So because I'm not a good operator, I don't enjoy looking at the spreadsheets and seeing how much more we made quarter over quarter, or like, oh, we were up, our net margin is up like 3%. I'm like, that's cool. But like, it's like, what did we build that nobody else is building right now? Right. Like, that to me is the thing that gets me probably most excited. So yeah, I just build things, get them up to a certain point, make sure they're sustainable, put somebody else in over to run it, go back to being an individual contributor, see if I can build something again, get it to 10 people or so, a couple $1 million in rev, and then get out and then let somebody run it.
Very cool. What is your, you've been working with clients, I don't know what your average client count is right now, but however many that is, but what are one or two of your biggest pet peeves on the client side, things that you just might drive you to fire them or have a serious conversation with them? We have at Anvil a no asshole client policy. I've fired my largest clients a couple times. It's painful, but it's the right thing to do sometimes. So what are some of your things that trigger you and your team to say this is a red flag?
I think it's just one thing. It's just like mutual respect. Like if you think about us like as an athlete, like no athlete scores every time they take a shot. So there has to be some failure rate. So I'm completely okay saying we tried really hard for you and maybe we weren't successful as an organization. That's part of the game that we play. And that does happen. But what you're not going to do on the path to being disappointed with me or my team or my company is treat people like something less than human. Like you're not going to yell at people. You're not going to talk to people a certain way. And if you do, then you're going to have to go because I can't have that on my conscience that like people are being berated or treated a certain way. The other thing that's great is I never let any one client be over 12% of our revenue. So like I think even like right now, our largest client might be 7%. That creates a long tail of clients. It also means that, our team members might have a couple more accounts to work on as a result, because, you get that one big client, it's great. But then sometimes clients can get a sniff that they have a little bit more control over the agency because they're 25, 30% of your rev. And sometimes they can start acting weird and trying to force your hand on things. And they're basically like, what are you going to do? Fire me and end up having to let go 20% of your staff. It's like, probably not. Because we don't want that to be out there, ego driven, right? It's like I don't want to be saying I had to do layoffs. So it's like I've seen some clients sometimes put their thumb on agencies a little bit heavy when they get the feeling that like, oh, I think I'm one of your big ones. So I mean, we literally work with some of the largest companies on the planet on some of their most important divisions. And if they ever get up to that range, we start being like, maybe we can't grow this. It's weird to hear them say it, because everybody else lines up to take it. But I'm like, you might have too much influence over me to where I can't just instantly fire you without also messing up the lives of some people. And like, I don't like that. I don't like that imbalance.
Yeah, right on. From a professional development side of things, that's kind of what this evolved from was our monthly brown bags internally, and then we've made them external with these interviews. And you're at the top of my list of people I admire and respect in this industry. But one thing you might be able to tell the team and the listeners is there a book or a short list of books, webinars, classes, resources that are must reads or must completes for your team or anybody that's aspiring to be successful in the digital marketing realm that you would recommend?
I think in order to be a good digital marketer, you have to be a good marketer. In order to be a good marketer, you have to be a good human. So I like to look more of like the books that remind us how to be a good human. I think that's a good place to start. So two of my favorite books on, so I like to read about psychology, because like, how good are you as a marketer if you study SEO? Not very good, because ultimately there's a set of triggers that are happening that are like core to how people buy things that have existed for hundreds of years, right? And if you don't understand that part of the human psyche, then all you are is a rank machine. You're not a customer understanding machine. So the first two books that I would recommend are Speed of Trust, and then Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. So Speed of Trust for me is all about like, we put a lot of sand in the gears of our businesses because we don't trust our coworkers. So it's like, oh, I got to do this, got to check up on this, got to do that. And it's like, well, what if I just started off trusting you and let you fuck that up? to where I don't trust you, instead of starting off where I don't trust you and you have to somehow ascend this thing to earn my trust. Like, what if I just started here? And I find that, yes, that means I get taken advantage of once in a while, but then it just keeps my mind so much more free on so many other decisions that I have to make from the beginning, right? I can make decisions much quicker that way. Mistakes were made, but not by me is really about where we believe our own bullshit and how we bullshit ourselves into believing things that actually aren't true, because we like the outcome of that mistruth. So that book is really, for me, it's very good to like look at yourself. Whereas a lot of books you read and you look out at the world and you're like, oh, they're messed up. That book I read and was like, ooh, where do I do this to myself? Like, where do I tell myself a story that like I want to believe, but like actually it's not the story. So those are two books that I just absolutely love. Then when you get into marketing, so that's human marketing. Oh, I got to add another one there too. Switch is just a great book. It's just like, it's a great psychology book. So there's those. Then you get into marketing, and I like anything written by, there's a book called Scientific Advertising and My Life in Advertising by Claude Hopkins. And they are both they're about 100 years old. And I think that as marketers, you know, we keep juicing algorithms and not understanding that those algorithms are there to understand how humans work. So you can skip the system, skip the game by starting with how humans have always worked and bought things. You know, back in the day, if you were a door-to-door salesman, because I guess that's, you know, it was salesman for a long time. If you were a salesman, like you would go and knock on people's doors and you would actually hear their pain. You would hear what they responded well to and don't. We sit behind these screens with these Google results and never actually see, is that helping? Is it not helping or whatever, right? So I love Claude Hopkins books because they get you back into if I didn't have algorithms to juice, if I didn't have screens, how would I do marketing? How would I get to know who these people are and what they're all about? So any books written before the internet from a marketing standpoint can be very valuable. I love copy books, like books that people wrote about how to write good copy. You know, it's funny. I saw a dig at digital marketers once, and I love it. And it was something like around like, I've never seen a digital marketer create a great print ad or something to that tune. And it was like, right, because like we're used to being like, what's the algorithm want us to say? So we write algorithmic ads, right? My favorite ads will never be written by a digital marketer because my favorite ads are, you know, yesterday you said tomorrow. Like, oh, right, like Nike, like yesterday you said tomorrow, right? And it's like, how often are we saying tomorrow I'm going to do, and then you wake up and you don't do it? It's like, that is never written by a digital marketer and probably will never be. Why? Because we go, what does Facebook want me to say in the ad to get the right score? So therefore we're just sounding like everybody else. You know what I'm saying? So like, I just love books that make me get out of the world of digital and bring me back to like what connects in here in the soul of people. So then I can do digital marketing in a way that most others don't.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, that begs the question: how do you stay up on the world of digital marketing? You're like a futurist within search, and even the bigger picture. So, what are your must? You know, the feeds, the subscription, like top 3 places you find useful information to keep on top of things.
Don't. That's up to my team. My team that runs divisions, like they need to know what's going on in SEO really well. To me, I look at SEO as, well, aren't they just trying to find the best results for people? This is the thing I think everybody missed. You know, it's like people are like, well, Wil, how did you avoid this algorithm update and this algorithm update and survive for 19 years? I'm like, because guess what? I was smart enough to realize that having a long list of shitty directories was never going to be the way to ultimately win for the long term. So what I did is I did that crap, but I always had my escape hatch on the other side that was like, someday they've got to realize that these links of directories that are so easy to submit to can't be the best way to create a search engine that truly solves people's problems, because we're literally manipulating it left and right way too much. So then you go, well, what are they going to use? And I'm like, it looks like they're probably going to use something that is harder to game, like getting links from high quality sites. So all of a sudden, Seer was like, oh my God, Seer's known for getting links from like the New York Times and shit, like, you know, back in like, you know, late 2000s. And it was like, well, yeah, dog, because like I stopped hiring people who wanted to figure out how to figure out, does that directory pass value? Like those people had no role for me anymore, even though it was currently working, because I went, that ain't going to work forever. And sometimes I made future bets that took Google 3 or 4 years to catch up to, and it got a little bit risky, right? In the sense of, I was like, oh my God, I've overinvested in this thing and Google's not as smart as I thought they were. But it ultimately worked out because there's been 2 or 3 major updates where tons of agencies basically took a bath and either exited, or then they suddenly became like, we're now content marketing. And it's like, it's not in your DNA. Whereas I was hiring these content marketers and people that were doing PR style outreach before it became an algorithmic signal, which meant we were ready to go as Google kind of made these changes versus reacting to it when it was way too late.
Right, right. So, we've been talking about SEO, but you obviously also offer the paid side of things. So, I think the question would be, what is your take on Google sunsetting third-party data, the privacy issues with Apple and Facebook's having to react? What are you willing to share about how you think brands need to combat or work around this? These the first party data is one answer, but what's your POV on all this?
Ooh, so one thing I do want to get back to about the SEO thing is when I stopped reading about how to do SEO better, I started reading about how to do Facebook and paid search better. So because to me, here's one of the things that just drives me nuts is our customers search Google and they see paid ads and organic. There's no tool that I know that brings those two things together. You're like, wait, but our customers see both. Why aren't we trying to replicate that? You know what I'm saying? So for me, when I stopped getting deep on SEO, I thrive on going back to being a rookie again. So it's like, yay, everybody wants me to come speak at SEO conferences. I'm like, that's great, but I'm not going to get any smarter talking to a bunch of people who think I'm the shit. I need to go to a PPC conference where I know nothing and take a boatload of notes and go, how would I do SEO better if I knew what these people knew? And all of a sudden my world was open. So while we were fighting about not provided, I was like, wait, paid gets every search term and every conversion. So we're going to fight and create models on how to replicate those old words. And I'm just going to slide over and start pulling search query reports from paid where I get the exact search term and whether or not it converted. You can go use monthly search volume, because that doesn't pay anybody's bills. And that was like, whoa, Wil, wow, we got to have you come and speak. And it's like, but this team, paid team, knew that data was there the whole time, but because they don't do any SEO, they never thought of using it. SEOs, because they literally don't do any PPC, are sitting around there we got to figure out not provided. And it's like, they already have all the data. Let's just use their data and join it to our data. Right? It's like, well, what's a join? Right. You're like, well, then you got to go learn SQL. And then those are the kind of things where I've had to become a rookie to stay on top of innovation. As it relates to Apple and iOS and all this stuff, to me, I have a very blanket statement on this because I'm not too deep in it yet because I'm still analyzing the data. But we have to find ways, I think, as organizations to add value in a way that makes people say, hey, I want to give you my information first party, right? It'd be interesting if we stopped calling them first party and third-party cookies and started relabeling it something like customer value cookies. I don't want first-party cookies. You know how you can get more people to give you their first-party information? Show them some value, right? It's like, I don't know. I fork over first-party information all the time. I'm not thinking of it as, I'm giving you some first-party information. It's like, that's how we label things, and we get very hooked on first-party data. And it's like, how about customer value? And then it's like, well, how are we going to figure out customer value when I read search engine land all day? You're like, right, you need to read stuff from Claude Hopkins and learn how people's brains work when they see pricing, when they see headlines, what makes people react. And it's like, that's how you're going to build trust with your customer, right? Speed of trust. So you can see how this just all kind of weaves right back to the more you know humans, the easier it is for you to create campaigns that are going to make them fork over first-party data so you can do your digital marketing better. The less you spend understanding how people make decisions about what to buy and how they make decisions, then the less equipped you are to create value for them, which means you're waiting for some study to come out to tell you what to do next.
So you're saying go back to the original must read is understanding the human mind and how it works and how we make decisions. And then you can start to, from there, reverse engineer the technology and the solutions.
Trust.
Yeah.
Speed of trust. How do I gain trust with my customer? Great. Okay, now I need to read books on psychology and things like that to understand how do they think when they see these things, right? And I think if you build trust with your customer and you understand how people broadly work when they see things and how they make decisions, then you're going to be in a much stronger position to understand what might make somebody tick. Mm-hmm. That's my bet.
Okay. Now, shifting gears, I totally listened to that, but I already wrote this down as I'm interested to know, what do you think the next hot today or in the next year or so technology or tool trend that you're like, I'm going deep into this in 2022? And or this is something I need people to know, like Gary Vaynerchuk's NFT, like what's your NFT? If you have one, like a mantra, an initiative, it's just something to rally on.
It's interesting. I think Gary Vee gets a lot of crap, but I actually love the dude. I do. I think the guy's real. Like, he says what's on his mind, and if people don't like it, that's okay. Instead of trying to be everybody's pal, he's approachable. He tries to get back to people. He doesn't sit up on his throne. So I really like Gary Vee. I say all that to say, but Gary Vee bets on every new technology. So a broken clock is right twice a day, or whatever that saying is. So it's like, yeah, if you say that Snapchat's going to be huge, well, yeah, eventually one of the things that you pick is probably going to be big. And like everything seems to just be big. I haven't ever heard him say like, this new thing is a waste. Now he might have, but I just haven't seen him be like, what's going to be not big? AR glasses. Like, it's like, why don't you take some bets on some stuff that you think isn't going to work, instead of saying like, I think everything's going to work, because then you're like, see, I was right. And it's like, yeah, but we don't learn anything when everybody says, see, I was right. Like, I always learn more from when people were wrong. So where am I making my bets? I'm making bets on stuff that I saw 4 or 5 years ago that nobody's adopting, like combining SEO and PPC data, getting better at combining that data in ways that can help me to create value. So like, I might have you take this out of the transcript.
Here, let me pause this for a sec.
So it's like, okay, just keep ignoring me, because it makes us the only place that people can come get it, in a very robust kind of scalable way. Like if you have 5 million paid search keywords, I can combine that data in less than 15 minutes with our current systems and show you all kinds of things. So there's 2 things that I'm working on right now that I find just it completely enthralling. So I want you all to stop and think about, if somebody comes to you and says, what image should I use in my e-commerce feed as my main image, right, for my e-commerce ads? Then if somebody comes to you and says, what imagery should I use on my landing pages? And what imagery should I use in my social ads? Like, think about how you would answer that question today. And I'm in the middle of building something, and it's super new, and it may never take, but what we're doing is, we're taking our massive scrapes of Google, which we already have done at a very robust, scalable clip for the last like 3 or 4 years. And we say, where is Google putting images in the top, 3 spots, let's just say. So Google feels highly confident that an image is the right answer. We're now manually, because this is an MVP we're just working on, we're manually extracting those images and then running them through Google's Vision API and finding out, hey, if Google thinks these images are the right images for this query, then maybe what we should do is take those images, run them through the Vision API, and find out all the common tags across these 20 images, right? Then you find all the commonality between those tags, and then you go and look at what the client's e-commerce feed's image is, and you can show them whether or not their e-commerce feed is showing people the image that Google's already learned is likely right. So right now I'm testing this with a client, and it's like, okay, we ran a bunch of images and we found that 90% of them have a fireplace in them, and like 80% of them have a picture in them, and 70% of them have something that's identified as a family in them, right? And then we go, why are you showing somebody the front of a can in your e-commerce feed instead of showing them the stuff that Google's already learned are the things that are the right answers for people? So like, those are the kind of things. And I'm like, hey, well, if we know that, then can we improve your e-commerce feed? Probably. If we know that, then can't we look at your landing pages and maybe run a landing page test that is like, hey, if Google's got all these images showing up for these specific search terms, then maybe on those landing pages, we should replicate the types of imagery that Google's already learned are the right answers, right? So it's like, or we can sit around and guess, like, and go, who's going to go into iStock Photo and pick a couple photos to show the client, and then we're going to sit there and banter back and forth on what we think is the right image to show. And I'm like, well, Google, if they're showing images for this result, they already know an image is a good answer. Why don't we extract those images, run them through a Vision API, and see what's common across all of them? So like that, super fun. Super fun. Like, I can't believe that's my job. Like, I don't get to work on that all day, but like, that's really fun. The other thing that I'm working on right now is Salesforce Data. So we use this company called Fivetran to manage our data ingestion. And Fivetran has these things called Connect cards. And what I love about Connect cards is it enables your client to basically say like, hey, well, you want my Salesforce data? I'm like, yeah, I want your Salesforce data. They're like, ooh, how are we going to give it to you? And what it does is these connect cards enable a client to create a username and password for me that I never get. Then they log in to, they go to these connect cards and they log in with that username and password for Salesforce. And I'm just like a role user in their system, but I never need to see the username and password. And then it automatically dumps their Salesforce data into my BigQuery instance. So now I can start to look at things in Salesforce that I right next to their paid data, next to their organic data, next to their analytics data, to start to find certain kinds of trends and whatnot across their across Salesforce that are affecting the other areas. But my client doesn't have to do all this work. They just have to log in, username and password one time, and every 6 hours, their Salesforce data comes in. So if we're starting to see them flag things in Salesforce as fraud, people are filling out forms and it's fraudulent, other paid search teams don't know that. So if Google is seeing conversions on the front end, they're telling you that this is working great. This is working great. You should spend more money on this campaign. If we find out that 80% of the people we call are a fake number, no voicemail, whatever, I'm piping that back in at the product level to go, oh, these couple products or these couple service lines, these are getting a lot of fake calls. We might want to look at that differently, bid differently. So like, and then the client only had to log in once with a username and password. And now I have that data coming in every 6 hours, which lets me potentially do things that other folks might not be able to do that are doing paid SEO, analytics, etc. So those are the two things that I'm working on. And, you know, like I said, I believe in the speed of trust. One of the things about the book is you default to trust. So I'm like, yeah, let me just put it out there and see what happens. Maybe somebody builds it before I do. But the world's big enough for a couple competing products. That's the way I look at it.
Of course.
So yeah.
Now I can tell what gets you excited, which is most of what you do. You've designed your role around that, which is commendable. Where do you see yourself doing this for another 5, 10, 20 years? Like, do you have this nuclear power when you're doing what you love?
It's at least, I would say it's at least 10, because every so often people, you know, they when I start getting bombarded with sales calls for people that are interested in acquiring the company, you know, you start being like, man, I went to school to be a teacher, dog. Like, this many people are interested in freaking buying the company. I'm like, let me at least talk to a couple of these jamokes. And you realize that it's really frothy right now. Like, people really want to acquire agencies. And so I go through that, like, you know, and I just went through that and it was like, hell no. And it was because my fear is this. I see Seer as a vessel. And I'm like, okay, somebody's going to give me a boatload of money and that's great and all. But then I'm going to watch this ship sail away that I won't have control over steering. And, you know, I don't want to just be another agency. So, you know, I think that we have a responsibility to our society. So, you know, I think if I let this vessel sail off, it's going to become a financial instrument. And I think that if I retain that for the next 10 years, it becomes an instrument both for financial gain as well as community impact. So I have not announced this yet, but I'm very close to. I believe that Seer can have between a $15 and $20 million impact on community over the next 10 years. So I am deeply committed to being able to get us to that level of impact on community. We're so serious about it that we're now going to hire a director of community impact, because every month when we get our teams together, we go over our financials and how our divisions are doing, and we spend 45 minutes on that and 0 minutes on like our impact on community. And I want to change that. Like, so I really am going to start to focus in that area. Today, we just paid, as a company, we just paid for 1 year of rent for a family in Philly who just flew in from Afghanistan. So like, we are starting to severely double down on community impact. And I think the thing that really fired me up about this is there's some entrepreneur in Pennsylvania who spent like 100 million to go to space and fly on Elon Musk's rocket for 3 days. And, you know, I'm like, there's real people hurting in this state. There's kids who ain't getting meals in this state. And like, I could never do that. And I was so pissed about that. But then I stopped and realized, like, I got a thing. I got a company and I can do something about that. While a lot of other folks can see those pains and choose to spend their money elsewhere. So it doesn't make sense for me to get angry about it, because that's a wasted emotion. What I can do is start to sit down with my wife, which I did right upstairs here, and we sat at our kitchen table and just started being like, what is the impact we think we could have over the next 10 years? And we're like, 15, 20 million sounds pretty fucking good. And now we're backing into that and figuring out how exactly we're going to get there.
So for those that have not listened to your the Amazing Marketing Sherpa podcast or interview you did, You slept outside to raise money for local charity, raised about $40,000. Tell us about that. A lot of people will write checks. Not very many people are willing to sleep out in the snow and the rain to raise money and awareness. So you're walking your talk. Tell the listeners about that.
Sure. I was talking on a podcast the other day about the first time I slept out. I slept in a parking lot that had security there because so many people are afraid. Whereas I'm not that afraid, but like a lot of people are afraid. I'm going to sleep outside in a so part of the city. So we had security there, right? So in spite of having security, I was sleeping in a box outside in a parking lot. And at around 4 a.m., some dump truck came through and at another lot like across the street and dumped the trash like 4 a.m. and scared the shit out of me. And because you're in a box, so you can't really see around yourself. You're sleeping inside of a box. And I was like, oh snap, that's vulnerability. Like you write a check, you don't feel vulnerable. Like when you're sleeping out in a box, you were like, and remember, I knew that 2 hours later, I was going to be back at my house, getting a warm shower and seeing my wife, right? So it wasn't like I was like, oh, it's like being homeless. It's like, no. I don't have any idea what that's like when I sleep outside. But what I do know what feels like is being scared. And like when that thing boomed and hit down, when the big truck like dumped the thing in and I like jumped, I was like, I'm scared right now. And then I look at it and I'm like, oh, okay. Like it's just a dump truck. But like for a moment there, I was scared. And I think that helps me to advocate for youth in a way that's different than if I just sat around and wrote checks. When I talk to a lot of youth at the shelter, and they're like, it's a lot of LGBTQ kids, and a lot of kids get thrown out of their houses because, they're like, hey, I'm gay, I'm this, I'm that, whatever. And, and you're like, really? Like, because it's just unfathomable for me to think of a parent kicking their child out in the winter because they choose to love somebody else. Like they're still choosing love. It's just somebody who's different than what you wished it was, right? Like, it's like you're gonna throw your kid out over that. And I think that sometimes hearing those stories makes me a stronger advocate than if all this time I just kind of sat back and wrote the same checks.
Fantastically powerful. What is the name?
I got one more thing on that, Kent. One more thing.
Yeah.
So Philly's had a horrible trash problem for trash pickup during the pandemic and whatnot. I don't know about how it's been out in Oregon, but it's been horrible, like just consistently missing days and whatnot. Your trash sits out and then the mice and the rats come out and then they freaking eat all through your garbage. Mad about it, right? So every Friday, like this Friday is another example, like every Friday I spend time talking to some executive director of a nonprofit and try to learn more about them and understand like what they're doing and whatnot and how they're impacting community. And I talked to this guy who runs this nonprofit that cleans up Philly streets, and he's a sanitation worker. And like, how many times have we as tech people sat and actually had a legit conversation with a freaking sanitation worker? And I also chatted with a guy who spent 9 years in prison last Friday, and on like a manslaughter case, and you start to hear people's stories, and you're like, damn, like I judge a lot of people from a distance. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up is we're all mad sitting in our warm houses, don't have to go out and sling trash for a living, about it taking 3 extra days, and now we got rodents and stuff, right? It's normal to be mad about that. And then when you talk to a sanitation worker, he goes, hey, Will, you know why that trash is building up? Because I wasn't complaining about it because I'm not a complainer. But I was talking to him about this. And he said to me, he goes, you know why that trash builds up? I'm like, why? He's like, well, first of all, let me ask you a few questions. I'm like, okay. He's like, have you thrown out more trash during the pandemic? I'm like, yeah, I cleaned up my basement, did this, did that. He's like, yeah. Okay. So you put out more trash? I'm like, yeah. He goes, so you put out more trash. He's like, what's the motion you would use to throw trash into a garbage truck? And I'm like, I don't know, kind of like this. Like I would like swing my shoulders and throw it up into the trash can. He's like, okay, cool. So if people are putting out more garbage and we are throwing it more and more into the trash truck, then a bunch of my guys are wearing out their rotator cuffs and they're injured. They can no longer pick up your heavy ass garbage for all the shit you remodeled in your fucking house. And I was like, oh, snap. I was like, yo, like that makes so much sense now. So now I'm empowered whenever somebody complains about the trash pickup situation. I'm like, yo, have you ever thought about this? Did you throw out more? Yeah, I threw out more trash. Yeah, how would you throw garbage into a garbage truck? Yeah, I would throw it like this. And I'm like, yeah, so you're moving your shoulders a lot, right? Well, if people are putting out 2 times the amount of garbage, then you're doing 2 times the amount of work on your shoulders, which means you might hurt yourself, which means you might need to take off some time. And in a pandemic where you can't hire people, your trash might end up staying out for 3 or 4 days. Like that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, man. We got to get from behind our screens and talk to real people that are nothing like us, not in the tech world. And you start realizing these people are going through different things that sometimes we just kind of complain and bitch about, but are actually like, once you understand the why behind it, you're just a more empathetic human being, which is, again, full circle. Let's come back to being freaking good humans. Like, once I understand that that's somebody's reality, I can put a lot more good in the world. But if I wake up and my trash bag has been torn apart by a raccoon and I'm mad about that and I start my day mad, I now don't start my days mad when my trash is all jacked up, but a lot of other people do, right? And it's because I have a perspective that I otherwise didn't have before.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. A good reminder that we all have different experiences and backgrounds and perspectives, but today's polarizing media and social make it easy to judge people. In fact, encouraging us to judge others, and not in particularly positive ways. So thank you for sharing that story. Now, I want to wrap up with this question. I know we're running out of time here. What is on Wil Reynolds' bucket list? You know, 1, 2, or 3 things that you're like, I'm going to do this, you know, before I kick the bucket, but maybe in the next, 5 years. And, it sounds like one of them is generate about 20 million in community impact in an X amount of time. But are there certain destinations or experiences, not specifically material items, but things you want to experience, things you want to do on your bucket list you'd want to share?
Nope. I have lived an amazing life. Like, I have seen the world in ways like this search thing has just taken me to places I never thought I would be. And so therefore, I'm almost to a fault. I have short-term vision. It's why I don't run the business, because I don't understand how my decisions affect the business long-term. I'm very like 6 months at a time. And you can't run a business that way. But broadly, like, I'm so happy with where I'm at right now that, like, I don't even dream of anything much better than what I already have. There's this rapper, J. Cole, who I just love. And he has a song called Love Yours. And the hook is, there's no such thing as a life that's better than yours. There's no such thing as a life that's better than yours. No such thing, no such thing. So for me, I'm just like, anything I want to go do, I'm going to go do. Like, that's the beauty of being financially independent. Like, and all I want to do is go back and build that freaking visual API thing I talked to you about, and spend more time in SQL and Salesforce to try to make great things happen in our company. Like, that's what I really want to do. So yeah, for me, it's not like, for instance, I could tell you that I would love to have a beachfront house in Brazil on the beach of Rio de Janeiro, but I can do that right now. But then, like, okay, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna buy a beachfront house on the beach in Rio de Janeiro. My kids have to go to school. Like, I can't just like, what am I gonna do? Like, just miss my kids for like months at a time while dad's hanging out in this house? No. So like, all right, that's not gonna happen. So no, I just don't have, I want to raise this 10 to 20 million, but that's already done. That's already accounted for, because if I walked out of my house today and got hit by a bus, the company automatically gets sold through an insurance vehicle to my president, and my wife gets the money, which means she would know that 20 million has to happen over the next X number of years. My president is amazing. Like, she would make that happen through the company. So that's going to happen either way. Like, that's just, it will happen. Like, we make those kind of things happen. So like, even that will happen. And anything else that I want to see happen has already kind of happened. So I'm just glad that I'm still alive and kicking, man, like, to kind of put as much good as I can in the world. And I was saying this yesterday to my head of sales. About every quarter or so, I asked myself, if you died in 10 years, if you knew you were going to die in 10 years, what would you do different tomorrow? And then I cut that number in half and go, if you knew you were going to die in 5 years, what would you do different tomorrow? Then I go 2, then I go 1 year, then I go 6 months, then I go 3 months. And if I can ever come up with something, then I'm like, start doing it now. Why like be like, oh, if I knew I was going to die in 3 months, I'd start doing this for my kids. We'll start doing that now, because you're not guaranteed that. Like, why would you wait, right? So I think because I've always disciplined myself to kind of look at life through that lens, that I've ultimately never really had this thing that I wanted to do, because I'm like, well, then let's go do it now, because like, I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow or not, right? So that's just the way that I kind of live my life, and that's why I don't have a lot of wants.
That's fantastic. Wil, any parting advice for the Anvil team or any other listeners on, as they look to grow their career in digital marketing? It feels like my takeaways today are be human and understand human nature makes you a better marketer, makes you a better digital marketer. And then, I've always been a proponent of giving back to the community that helps you succeed, and you're already doing that in ways that is bigger than most. Is there anything you would want to impart on our listeners before we check out?
Ken, tell me, how big is Anvil right now?
We're like under a dozen people. We're a total
Okay.
boutique.
All right. So I used to never want to be over 10 people. And I always wanted my company to be small. And something I'll just say, because I hated big companies and now I got one, right? And say, how does that happen? And now I'm thankful for it, because if we weren't as big as we were, we couldn't just in a month pull together enough money as a company to pay somebody's rent for a year that's coming over from Afghanistan and struggling. Her husband's killed by the Taliban, right? So it's like she gets the freak out of town. So like, don't be afraid of growth would be my only piece of advice for a company like yours, because we need more companies with good big hearts to want to grow, and that sometimes you got to deal with a lot of crap when you grow. And that's what I tried to avoid when I spent 3 years not letting Seer grow over 10 people. You turn away all the business and you're like, I don't want to get too big. And it's like, but we need the people with the big hearts to want to actually get somewhat bigger, because otherwise all we're left with is fucking WPP companies, right? And we know why they wake up every day. And it's like, if we can do some good after we make a bunch of money, cool, right? But like, so I would say don't be afraid of growth for those people that might be listening to this part of the podcast. Like, I think a lot of us like shun growth because we're like, we don't want to be this big ass company with all this infrastructure and rules and shit. And it's like, yeah, but you also get to have massive impact and point your vessel in a direction that can have a lot of good for a lot of people. So that's the only advice I'd have for the team is, because it's hard to want to grow sometimes. Like you have to look at yourself and be like, do we want to do this or that? And there are some impacts that you may be able to have if you're a little bit bigger that I would just challenge everybody on thinking about, because we need more good companies out here that are putting that kind of vibe out, not people going to, otherwise all we're left with is people want to go to fucking space.
Yeah,
I'll leave you on that.
That's the ultimate flex douche move. I agree.
Yep.
So Wil, thank you so much for your time. That's Wil Reynolds, 1L. The second L is not silent. In fact, it doesn't exist. Coming to us from Philadelphia. He's VP of Innovation with Seer Interactive, formerly just a simple associate, also happens to be the founder. And you can find him on the Twitter at Wil Reynolds, that's 1L. And I don't think you're any relation to Ryan Reynolds, but same spelling. Yeah, I'm a fanboy of him as well. You two guys are my favorites. Thank you so much for your time, Wil. We appreciate you. We appreciate what you're doing, not just for the industry, but for your community locally. And I look forward to seeing in the next 5+ years what you're doing with your community impact. That's fantastic.
It's going to be a ride. It's actually who's waiting for me in a Zoom call right now. It's an ED of a nonprofit here in Philly working with kids learning tech. So let me go ahead and roll.
We won't hold you back anymore. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Thanks so much. Thanks for excusing my lateness, by the way. Have a good day.
No worries. Bye-bye.